I love sweet potato casserole for Thanksgiving, but the marshmallows really aren't my thing. So in this video, I want to show you how I do my oat and pecan crumble sweet potato casserole. It is absolutely delicious, and I hope it makes your Thanksgiving table. For the full ingredient list, check the description box below, but enough talking, let's get cooking. The first thing we got to do is peel and boil these sweet potatoes. There's not a lot of prep needed for this recipe, so this is going to go quick. I've already got my oven preheated to 350, and I do have the convection setting on because I want to blow the air around to make sure that the top gets nice and crispy. And I got this pot of water already boiled, so once I cut these sweet potatoes, I can throw them right in. For sweet potatoes, I like to trim off the ends. They tend to have a lot of grime and gunk at the end, so I'm just going to take my knife and cut the ends off, and I'll do that for each one. Now that I've got those little ends cut off, I'm gonna give them a very thorough peel. I don't really want any of the peels inside of this sweet potato casserole, so we're gonna make sure that we're getting off all of the outside of these. And once I take up all the skin, we're gonna use this little part of the peeler, and we're gonna pull out any of the little potato eyes that the peeler doesn't get. Every time I show this, people are always like, I never knew what that was for until you showed it to me. I never knew either, but every peeler has it, and this is exactly what it's for. Let me know in the comment section if you didn't know that you already had one of those on your peeler. And I don't even know what kind of peeler you got, but they all have it. So to cut the potatoes once they're peeled, we're gonna split the potato in half. And sweet potatoes get a little hard, so what I like to do, especially on a large one, is I'm gonna push the knife right through, and then I'll cleaver down, and then I'll spin the potato the other way and cleaver down, and I'll get two halves. Then from there, I can handle them much better. Now I'm gonna cut them into large chunks, maybe about a little bit bigger than an inch, and I wanna make sure that they're pretty similar in size so they cook at similar rates. So now I got this pot of boiling water, and I'm gonna throw my sweet potatoes in there. I'm gonna boil these for about 12 to 15 minutes until they are nice and tender. While those are boiling, we only gotta prep two other things. So first I gotta chop up my pecans. You can use regular pecans and then cut them yourself, or you can get the pre-cut ones. You save a lot of money by buying the whole ones, and we like to keep these on hand in the house all the time. And let me know in the comment section, do you say pecans or pecans? Because I say pecan, but most people around me say pecan. So I'm gonna give these just a rough chop all the way through. And how I like to do it is just keep my knife in contact with the cutting board, and I'll keep just pushing the pile nice and close, and I'm aiming for all of the big pieces. At first they're all big, but as you keep working your knife through the pile, some will get chopped up, other ones will be much larger. And personally, I think the unevenness of a hand chop is much better than the evenness that you get when you buy pre-cut or pre-crumbled pecans, pre-chopped. And I think that's pretty good. You don't have to go nuts and completely pulverize it. Maybe I see a couple big ones in there. Okay, now that's good. And the last thing we gotta prep is we gotta take this stick of butter and cube it, and we're gonna cut it in half. And then we're gonna use one half that's gonna go inside the sweet potatoes, and the other half's gonna go on top in the oat pecan crumble. And this butter was in the freezer, and I just pulled it out about an hour before I need to use it. Keeping it cold is essential for the top, especially that pecan oat crumble. It also makes it way easier to cut when the butter's a little cold. If it's frozen, it's a little too hard, but this had just enough time to thaw. So I'm gonna cut the stick in half, and then once I cut it in half, I'll cut it into these little sticks. And now that it's cut into sticks, I'm gonna line it up and cut little chunks. I also find that if I store the butter in the freezer and then pull it out just a little bit before, it's a little bit better than storing it in the fridge, because once you cut it up, it starts to melt real quick and get real soft. Let's do the same thing to the other side. So half of this butter I'm gonna store inside the fridge to keep cold. The other half I'm gonna melt, and the melted half's gonna go inside of our mashed sweet potatoes. So after about 12 to 15 minutes of these in the boiling water, you can see that they're starting to be cooked. Just in case I'm curious and I really wanna find out, I can just take a knife and I can push it through like one of the big pieces. If it goes through without any resistance, you can assume that these are all good to be mashed. So I got my colander and my bowl set up. So I'm gonna take these out with the spider and put them inside the colander. I set it up like this because I really want these to be dry, because these are going to get mashed up to go in the casserole, and I don't want them to be overly wet. I'm going to let these cool down for a little bit before I mash them. It's also going to give an opportunity for more water to drip into the bottom bowl. So while we're waiting for that, we're going to make our oat pecan crumble. So once these are mashed, we can assemble everything all together. So the base of our oat pecan crumble is going to be some old-fashioned rolled oats. So I like to use the thick stuff. I think the instant stuff, it doesn't have as much texture. So here's some old-fashioned rolled oats, like the thick stuff. And here's those pecans that we chopped up before. So now to that, we're gonna add a 1/4 cup of some all-purpose flour. And maybe you wanna make this gluten-free. You can use a gluten-free flour alternative, but here I'm just gonna use the regular all-purpose stuff. And now to that, we're gonna add a 1/4 cup of brown sugar. And now we're gonna put in a little bit of cinnamon. Now here I'm gonna use a whisk to mix this all together. I'm gonna use the whisk to break up the crumbles of brown sugar and also the flour. It's gonna help get that to be just a little less crumbly. And we just wanna give this just a rough mix, because we still need to mix our butter in, but I'm gonna do that last, right before we put this on top of the mashed sweet potatoes. And I did not store my brown sugar too well, so I got a lot of chunks out of it. This is just a little PSA. Make sure when you're storing your brown sugar, you close the top. Otherwise, you're gonna get all these hard crumbles on the top. I always learned that the hard way. So these have had a chance to cool down and drain, so they're really nice and dry. So now I'm just gonna take my regular potato masher and get in there and mash these up. I don't like my sweet potato casserole to be super smooth, so once I smash this enough, and even if there's like some big chunks in there, I like to leave it. I don't want it to be super smooth like we do like a silky mashed potato. I'm just trying to get all the big chunks to get mashed up. Maybe you like yours a little smoother, go ahead and mash the heck out of it. So now to our mashed sweet potatoes, I'm gonna add some heavy cream. You can also use milk or half and half. I just happen to have some heavy cream, and it's a good reason to get rid of it. I'm gonna use heavy cream because it has a richer flavor, but if you just have milk on hand, you can just use milk or half and half. Now our melted butter. Now a couple spoonfuls of some maple syrup. This is the maple syrup I get from my friend that lives in Minnesota. This stuff is just some of the best maple syrup for like cooking, because the flavor on this is so smoky and so good. So if you have some good maple syrup, this is the time to use it. This stuff is absolutely delicious. Tastes nothing like Mrs. Butterworth. And even though we did put maple syrup in this for some sweetness, I'm still gonna add a little bit of brown sugar. You could leave this out because we're already putting the brown sugar crumble on top. It's definitely gonna bump up the flavor of this dish. And if we're making it for Thanksgiving, we wanna go all out. That's not the day to save on calories. A little vanilla extract. Some more cinnamon. It's Thanksgiving and cinnamon goes on everything. Now we're gonna grate in some nutmeg. You can use the pre-grated stuff, but I've never found that that even comes close to the flavor that you get out of the fresh nutmeg. So a little microplane and some fresh nutmeg is always gonna be the best. And this stuff's super potent, just a little bit, it goes a long way. And lastly, a pinch of salt or two. And you can use a masher, you can use a spoon, or you can use a nice wood spatula, and we're gonna get in there and mix everything all together. This isn't even cooked and this smells so good. And if you notice like you did like a terrible job of mashing like I did, you can get in there with your spatula and smash those up too. But again, I like to keep this rustic, so if it does get the big chunks in it, oh well. Now that we've got that all mixed up, we're gonna take some butter and we're gonna line this casserole dish. This casserole dish is probably like a little short of a 9 by 13. I think it's probably like an 8 by 12. And we'll take some butter and we're gonna put it on the inside of that casserole dish, especially around the edges, making sure that nothing gets stuck to this as we're scooping it out. And I'm just peeling back the paper on a stick of butter and just rubbing it all on the inside, especially those corners and sides. And now we'll take our sweet potato mash and we'll put it inside the casserole dish. Now we're gonna spread this out nice and evenly. Doesn't need to be super smooth on top, but definitely want it flatter. Nice and even in the dish. And because you want this to look pretty, let's clean up the edge so that there's no sweet potato on the outside that's gonna get all burnt. So now we'll take our cubed cold butter and we'll add that to our oat pecan brown sugar delicious mix. And there's some things that are best done by hand. This is one of them. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mix this up and I'm gonna try to smush the butter into the oat pecan crumble. And I'm trying to get very irregular cold chunks of butter in here. And all I do is like to take the butter, smush it in between my hands, and once it breaks up a little bit, I'll give it a mix. And I'm just looking for any of the pieces that didn't spread out too much yet. So now let's take this and spread this on top. Our hands are still dirty, so we can just spread it out with our hands and get a nice even coating on top. And so before we put this in our preheated oven, I'm just gonna give this a light spray of oil. Stuff's pressurized, so it's gonna blow the flour around a little bit. So I'll do it from nice and high. I just wanna see just no dry spots. It's gonna give it a extra nice, good brown color on the outside. And right before this goes in the oven, I'm just gonna clean up the edge again. So now I'm gonna put this in our preheated 350-degree oven for about 20 to 30 minutes until the top is nice and golden and brown. I have the convection setting on because I think it blows around the air and it makes it a little crispier, a little browner, and a little quicker, but I don't think the convection setting is totally needed for this. Once you start to see some of the pieces getting nice and brown on the top, this is good to go. And you should be able to smell the toasted oats and the toasted pecans. They shouldn't smell raw. You could definitely smell that they are toasted. And this looks absolutely delicious. We're gonna let this cool for a little bit before we cut into it. So let's let this sit for a few minutes before we try it out and see how it came out. This smells unbelievable. I mean, let's be honest, anything that's got this much butter and a cinnamon, when you stick this thing in the oven, it smells fantastic. But enough talking about it, let's see how we did. So any place is as good a place as any to scoop this out. I always like a good corner piece. Look at this beautiful layers of sweet potato and the oat crumble on top. I am so excited to try this. So it's gonna be pretty easy to get everything on one bite here. We'll just take a nice big scoop right from the bottom. This is gonna be an epic bite. Nothing against the people who like the casserole with the marshmallows, but this is way better. The texture on this is so awesome because the sweet potato is soft and creamy and delicious. The oat and pecan crumble on top, it's got that nice, crumbly, hard texture to it. So from a texture standpoint, way better than soft sweet potatoes and soft marshmallows on top. I mean, this took a little bit more work, but it is way worth it. That is absolutely delicious. You could serve this to me for dessert and I will take it. This is so good. Everything here pairs so nicely together. the cinnamon, the brown sugar, the sweet potatoes, the pecans. This is wonderful. You put this on your Thanksgiving table, people will go nuts. They'll forget all about those marshmallows. I'm gonna finish the rest of this sweet potato casserole. If you're into Thanksgiving casseroles, check out my green bean casserole. That is another really nice version. Doesn't use any canned stuff. I'm sure you'll love it, and I'll see you there. Thanks.